All right, everyone. We are now live on Facebook. Welcome.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for being here. It is the 11th episode of the FCCI Cacao Academy conversation series. My name is Lauren Heineck of Well Tempered Media, and I am joined by a slew of interesting people in the cacao sector today. I can't wait to introduce them all. And if you're joining us live on Facebook, we are so grateful for you to be here, part of the conversation. You're welcome to engage in the comments below. The past episodes are found on the FCCI YouTube channel with Spanish subtitles. And the creators of this project, the FCCI Cacao Academy, are Dr. Carla Martin, Harvard lecturer and executive director of the Fine Cacao and Chocolate Institute, and Alyssa Jade McDonald-Bertel of Cacao Academy. They have been developing behind the scenes of these conversations with their stakeholders and volunteers in an enormous project that is coming to life. And this is a place where we come to discuss how things might be impacted by others' perspectives. And in that case today, we are going to be looking further into the Philippines and Indonesia with our guests who are joining us. So of Kablon farms in the Philippines, we have Ernesto Pantua Jr. and Estela Duque. And from Indonesia, we are joined by B.T.s. Ariza. Thank you all for being here. To kick it off, we will go back to the co-founders, Carla and Liz, to hear how things have evolved from last week.
Thank you so much, Lauren, and thank you everyone for joining us. So we're at a really exciting moment in the development of some of our first materials. Last week, as you heard, we spent time in production. So we were doing photography and videography. This week, the materials have been edited and they are ready. And we will be hosting Zoom Train the Trainer sessions throughout the rest of the week for a group of over 50 trainers in Nicaragua. What we'll do in those Train the Trainer sessions is introduce them to the materials, invite them to practice with the equipment that they bring along, and in addition, do a little bit of testing and evaluation to see whether the materials are successful or not, to seek their feedback, and then we'll co-design the way in which we plan for them to take those materials and bring them out into farming communities. So we're really excited to be at this point. We'll have a lot more to report after we've done that, but stay tuned.
Absolutely. I'm so proud of where we are in this space. And just to pick up anybody who's new to the FCCI Cacao Academy, the reason why we are training this particular curriculum is because the farmers that we spoke with have asked specifically. We are transdisciplinary, which means we always start with farmers' needs first, and then we build curriculum and technology according to what they need. In fact, at the back end of FCCI Cacao Academy, there are hours every day just checking this way, this communication, this discussion, this photo, does it make sense to the specific farmers that we are working with in Nicaragua? And I'm so very, very proud that we deliver through a very difficult time of COVID. As Carla just mentioned, now we have trained the trainers on Thursday and Friday. For anybody who's trying to coordinate any activities now, you know how difficult it is to get groups together or to get group activities completed. With COVID-19 and physical distancing, we've made sure that there are, for example, 50 individuals who are very interested to learn this material and become master trainers, but disperse themselves around Nicaragua, sometimes in hotel halls, sometimes in local organizations, to come together in very, very small groups with physical distancing to observe and be part of a learning. For us, it was the most important to maintain farmer learning and maintain connection during this time. As we have seen, sometimes there are large multinational organizations who've pulled their employees away from the field. Some NGOs and charities are not able to act and participate in the field, and some government organizations are also not allowed to keep up the extension services to farmers that have typically helped them stay in touch with what's going on, stay on top of what the farm requirements are. So for us, our number one priority is to keep the connection and the promise to the farmers of, we will give you what you have asked for in our best possible way. And so for us, this is a hugely defining week, and we're very, very proud. And we would like to give a small shout out to the 10 volunteers that you mentioned before, who are from Harvard University, University of Mannheim, Clinical University Vienna, and more, who have been active on a weekly basis to build this curriculum, map it to the technology required. Excitingly, next week, we'll be having design thinking sprints where we bring another world together for Dominican Republic. But you have to tune in then to hear out how we build it.
And just to give you a quick anecdote of how we needed to kind of roll with the ever adapting COVID situation, we had a plan in place that we were sure would work. And in fact, we had tested it out, where some of our contacts in Nicaragua, the técnicos, or the agricultural extension trainers, would travel to meet different cocoa farmers who are part of our recording. Essentially what we're doing is we're recording audio conversations between one of our team members, Jose Lopez Ganem, in Spanish with the cocoa farmers in Nicaragua. But because the COVID-19 case rate has risen very dramatically, what the team indicated to us is they said, we're not certain about the level of risk that we have. And so we said, well, we've got to find a different way to make this work. We can't just be dominated by this plan. We've got to use the technology differently. And so we've quite literally had people, who have a phone that they can use, but not a good signal, climbing up to the top of the tallest hill in their community in order to be able to call us, rather than having them get picked up in a truck where they might be exposed to risk, brought to another place where there might be more people and more risk that they're exposed to. And we're making all different kinds of decisions as we adapt to that situation. And what I'm happy to say is that the quality of the instruction doesn't change. And it's because technology allows us to adapt in different ways. So the quality of the sound might be slightly different, but that's not an issue. What people want is to learn. And if they're able to learn with high quality audio, they're also able to learn with moderately high quality audio. So these are the kinds of decisions that you can make when you prioritize curriculum over these different constraints that come about.
Thank you both for filling us in there. And now let's move on to discuss with our guests today. Ariza, I would love to start with you. You are a research scientist at the Indonesian Coffee and Cocoa Research Institute. Again, we're so grateful to have you here and that you stayed up late to join us in this conversation. We're very appreciative. And we would love to hear from you regarding what is the crossover between cocoa and coffee currently within the archipelago, and a little bit more about the importance of those two crops.
Okay, so firstly, thank you for inviting me here. So it is an honor for me as the representative of cacao producing country to be able to meet the consumers of the cacao. And I would say that coffee and cacao are they were grown from the Dutch colonial, and we are just continuing the crops. And they have been here since 1900 or something. And now both are becoming one of the major contributors in the non-oil gross domestic products. And particularly for coffee and cacao, cacao is one of the priority research in Indonesia in terms of agriculture. Coffee is more kind of a trending, happening crop lately. Yeah, because of the influential people in my country now drinking coffee in social media. So, but we happen to do the research on coffee and cacao since 1911. So both are very important crops for my institution. And I've gathered some data about the coffee and cacao and there is only one region in Indonesia that does not grow coffee and cacao, which is the Jakarta and our capital city. And I can say we can find coffee and cacao in any regions across Indonesia, but they are mostly concentrated in Sulawesi, in Sumatra, and Java. So it is those are really the crop of Indonesia, even though they were introduced by Dutch colonial. And for cacao, 98% is smallholder farms, and only 1% is operated by estate companies, and the other 1% is operated by private companies. And if you realize the acreage of a farm for each farmer, even one farmer can have less than 1 hectare. You can imagine how many farmers and the family members depend on the income from cacao. So yes, cacao is very important for us.
Thank you. And Ernesto, aka June, it is a pleasure to have you also with us, and you've joined us as well late in the evening. You have a beautiful family history involved in agriculture, and that's where we want to start today, is learning a little bit more about what is Kablon Farms and how cocoa has impacted your work. And just additionally, if you could give us a quick summary into what is the current state of the Philippines cocoa sector.
Sorry. Thank you for inviting me. But the Kablon farm, as I have told you, was a family-owned farm, and it's a multi-crop farm started by my father way back 1960s. And the current state of the cacao industry in the Philippines is actually influenced by what had happened to our history. As you know, the Philippines was the first in the Asian countries that has the cacao plantings, and that was because of the colonialization of the Spaniards. And the first plantings that the Philippines have actually is the native ones, what we call the native, but it's actually the Criollo variety. And that was on the 80s. That's why the Filipinos has already learned how to use chocolate as primarily as a breakfast drink. No, I think it was initially pioneered by, it's earlier known to be a special drink to special people. Actually, a book written by our national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal, differentiated the kind of drink that is given to a guest and a chocolate drink given to a commoner. It was told in the history book that it's a novel written by the Jose Rizal, Noli Me Tangere, touch me now, in English, but in Spanish it's Noli Me Tangere. And if you're given a thicky chocolate, then you're a special person. But if it's diluted chocolate, then you're a commoner. And that's why the Philippines really has the taste of the fine Criollo variety. However, when the hybrid cacao was introduced during the 80s, no, the farmers were really were surprised because the robust nature of the hybrids really shocked them. It as against the very fragile Criollo variety, and this started actually in the southern part of Mindanao and not in the Luzon area. because maybe of the proximity, the hybrid cacao was first introduced to the Philippines from Malaysia. Actually, as I was told when I was still young then, no? A young farmer. Then the farmers began cutting down their old native trees, the criollos. And at a certain time, they were surprised after drinking the chocolate drink from a hybrid. It has a completely different taste from the criollos. And that was very, very unfortunate period of the cacao industry in the Philippines, because everybody was planting hybrids. Then suddenly the criollos gradually disappeared. And wow, the taste of cacao really was very different. It was a fortunate thing that my father, who is a pioneer in Mindanao, because they are not from actually born in Mindanao, but born in Luzon, and they settled in this part of the Philippines then, because there's not much education being done in the southern part of the Philippines. So that's the sorry state of the cacao industry. Most of the plantings are in Mindanao, but the higher quality variety is in Luzon. And we were just fortunate because my father knew the taste of a good chocolate. And when we were still small, we were already roasting cacao beans, criollos, and making them into chocolates and selling them also in the community. So we planted also the hybrids, but my father really didn't cut the natives. And when we expanded our plantation, we used the seeds and not the propagated seedlings being distributed by the government, and which are mostly hybrids. So that's the sorry state. Fortunately for us, for the family, my niece Estela family visited the farm, and they saw the plantation. And Estela then was living in Europe, and she told me that, Tito June, this cacao can be sold in UK. And well, that started it all. And maybe Estela can develop or share more her experience in promoting our cacao, or on what the real state of the market in the Philippines. Because as a farmer, I'm really concentrated on our operation and not much on the real industry, what's going on in the whole economy.
Right. Thank you, Tito June. I just want to correct that he dragged me to Mindanao. I hadn't been to the farm for 14 years, and he called me up and he said, right, you have to come here because you have an important job to do. So that was actually 2015. And I just want to say briefly, like 2016 to 2020, what the highlights were for each year. So we started from nothing, basically. I'm an architect and I didn't promise him anything. But because I'm a researcher, I also very quickly found out what the niches were in the market in Europe. And at that point in time, actually, I was based in Germany. But by 2017, 2016, I moved to UK. And the very first hurdle that I had to overcome was actually introducing the name South Cotabato, because everybody knows about Davao origin through Askinosie. So people are asking, well, where is South Cotabato in the first place? So that's the very basic hurdle that I had to overcome. But once that I had managed to convince a few chocolate makers to try it, and I understood as well how to taste the bar, I decided, right, we have to actually close the loop and bring the change to the Philippines. And so in 2017, I also started the Craft Chocolate Festival with the help of the Ayala Center in Makati. And it was this understanding that I began to see that in order to make this actually work for the farm, I couldn't just bring 1 ton. We had to bring in a container load so that the chocolate makers could benefit from the lower cost of logistics. And so 2018, the idea is to consolidate that position, and with the help of Don Hauer, that was the very first container load of Philippine cacao, although not yet officially certified as organic, that brought the market price down. Because when we were shipping it by air, it would just be, at a loss. And 2019, those events in 2018 gave us the ability to sponsor a project with Zoe Papalexandro to create new flavor profiles for Kablon farms. And so I conceptualized that project and shared it with another company, and we brought Zoe to the Philippines to do that. Now, with that in mind, we could see that we could access other markets. And so the following year, in 2019, we were able to partner with Uncommon Cacao. And a few weeks ago, the first container load has left, and it's on its way to New Jersey. And we're very excited because we're going full circle with the Filipinos elsewhere in the world where the majority are. And so we're going to have them in the United States. To close the loop, I think that in 2020, given though this is a very difficult year, it has provided everybody with space to think about what is the next step. And for us, I think in South Cotabato, what the logical way to move about is to get the idea of specialty cacao recognized at the World Trade Organization level. And the way that I think that would happen is to get the GI, geographical indications, status recognized for the Philippines. But obviously this is not a corporate undertaking, it has to be a national undertaking. And so what we're trying to do is convince the national government to go behind us. That's the state.
I appreciate hearing from both of you and your varied experiences. We want to center more around some of those like farmer training themes and where that element of quality has been impacted. That's really amazing to hear your story of how even within your own farm in a short period of time, you significantly altered that. I think the question for all of you would be, within your islands, within these nations, what has been a struggle, or what have been some of the hurdles in agricultural extension training? June, you had just mentioned that there was some poor training in the past, but what is holding people back from accessing the training that they need to move forward?
Actually, the trainings that is being done for the cacao industry, especially in this part of the region in Mindanao, is being undertaken by SIDAMI. It's an organization mostly by farmers from Davao City, and is being helped also by the Department of Trade and Industry and the Department of Agriculture. However, the trainings are actually centered on the production side, and not much on the post-harvest and how it influences the market price, if it's a well-fermented beans. And as as everybody know for sure, that the Philippines is still a net importer of cacao beans. And that's very, very sad because the government has already embarked on a massive planting of cacao, especially here in the island of Mindanao. But however, the farmers have stopped taking good care of the crops because the market price of unfermented cacao beans is very, very low. And there are only very few farmers that are into fermentation. And besides, I have been raising this concern to the proper government agencies and to our organization, especially, and also our organization asking the government. But I think they will be hearing from us. However, because of this pandemic event, it would be very difficult to push it. We would like to suggest that the big corporations that are already importing beans from other countries take a look to the fermented cacao beans, the local fermented beans, and if it's really possible to get those beans already being fermented by other local farmers. And that is, I think, the key if ever we wanted to help the farmers. Because for production, there are only a lot of there are already a lot of farmers that have already planted cacao and they are already bearing. And the problem is the low price of unfermented cacao beans in the market. Yeah. So
could I just add one thing to that? And that is the fact that the agriculture side of the sector in the Philippines, in terms of government agencies and trade, are actually separate. And so there's no continuity in the kind of improvement on one side to flow into the other. And you can't create origin chocolate with badly fermented beans, which has to actually happen at the cusp of the agriculture side production, because trade only takes over once it's already fermented. And so we need that kind of connection, very deep connection between the two agencies for the system to work and to create better tasting cacao.
Ariza, have you noticed or witnessed any hurdles that have impacted the trainings in Indonesia?
Yeah, so my institution may serve training for around 1,000 farmers per year. And actually the distance or the location is not a problem. We can invite farmers sponsored by the governments, or we can be invited to the farmers' location to deliver in-house training. But the hurdle is the motivation of the farmers. So what they are expecting after any trainings will be a price improvement, and that is something we cannot guarantee. So the life after any trainings will be the same like the life before training. So they know how to maintain a good farm, how to produce a high quality beans. But if there is no better future for their cacao price, everything will stay the same.
In agreement there. Yes, and I would love to hear whether this is directly impacted by COVID or not, just in general, in terms of how training might be affected by geography, knowing that often you have various spacing between these islands, or you want to connect, and perhaps what digital tools are in place or are lacking to offer that sort of training. Ariza, if you'd like to start again, we can stay with Indonesia and then move on to the Philippines again.
Yeah, so maybe I can continue. For us, because of the COVID, people just think about something else instead of training. So they prioritize how to keep their daily income. So training is training, and maybe education, non-formal education is no longer a top priority. So they invest their time and energy for something else to secure their income. So actually, most of the trainings could be delivered virtually. We are already familiar with Zoom or WhatsApp, or we can do a video call. Yeah, so for me, as I observe from the situation during pandemic, is the motivation and the priority for getting more education and knowledge. And for the topics for farmers that will be very challenging for virtual delivery is grafting, pruning, and also pest and disease control. We always have to have an in-person and demonstration, and I cannot imagine I have to conduct a video call with the farmers. And in the field, the signal is not always good, and we can also get so frequent interruptions. So my institution also postpones such trainings. We only deliver a post-harvest or quality control trainings through online platforms. And we will wait until the situation gets better, until we can meet the farmers in person and provide such knowledge.
And now with Kablon Farms, we're speaking here about a single estate. So that's quite interesting now to have a comparison of how you've been adapting perhaps with your own location and your own team in this situation of COVID. Either Estela or Ernesto.
Yeah. For actually the work in the farm, we are very fortunate. Because firstly, we are a diversified farm. Then secondly, I think the difference for us is we are a bit of a, we have done the value chain actually, from production to processing to marketing. And fortunately again, about more than 90% of our produce are marketed locally, no? And we just started exporting the beans this past 5 years. And now, since what we produce in our estate, we reserve for export because of its high value, we are now starting to get beans from local farmers for our local processing. So what we are doing now is to consolidate wet beans. That means the farmers sells to us their newly depodded cacao, and we do the fermentation and the drying, so that we can control the quality of the beans for processing locally. So that is what we are gradually doing now, and hopefully we can already purchase a substantial amount of beans from local farmers. But these local farmers should be within only on our municipality, so that it would be very, very it would be accessible to farmers to deliver their produce to us, and we also would have easier time to monitor their crops and their kind of harvest, because that is a very, very critical aspect if we really wanted to maintain the quality of our cacao beans. Yeah.
I think I need to prompt my uncle, because I know that he has something to say about it. I think you talked about the education of the technician. I
Uh-huh.
remember that conversation we had, and I think it's useful to share something about that.
Oh yeah. For the Philippine industry, cacao industry, if we want really to pursue the development of the cacao, it is very important that the government technician be trained on the importance on fermentation and actually the technology on fermentation. I have been asking the Department of Science and Technology to undertake experiments on fermentation, particularly on the minimum ferment the minimum weight of cacao to be fermented. What is the minimum to have a good fermentation, and what method to be used? Because there are a lot of methods. There are box, there are heap, there are baskets, and you know, the farmers need to have that information so that they can be trained, or they would know if how many farmers are needed to have a consistently good fermentation. And the facility also can be built for a common use, because like for us, we only do one fermentation batch for 1 week, no? Because we harvest every 2 weeks, and we reserve alternately. Our farm would harvest on this first week, and next week the farmers that we are buying will have their fermentation schedule on the next week. So those protocols should be taught to the farmers if we really wanted to let them earn income from their cacao farms. But firstly, we have to teach them that there is a difference really on the farm gate prices for fermented beans and not fermented beans. But for us, we are already buying the fermented beans. No, not fermented beans. The wet beans at a much higher price if the farmer themselves dry them without fermentation. So that's what I think we are promoting, because the farmers, the community already know that we are producing one of the premium cacao beans in the region.
Are you using anything to communicate with your farmers or your network that is either a new technology or something that is under development that has helped you greatly? Maybe WhatsApp or through Facebook?
Not yet, the organization, our South Cotabato Cacao Council, has initiated our first Zoom meeting. But, it didn't push through because maybe we're still new to the technology, and we still do not know how to use the digital equipments. So it would be very hard for us to go into digital method of trainings. I think for us, the best way still would be a farm tour on a very limited scale, or the government or the technician of the government should be trained, or the state universities that are undertaking agricultural courses or food technology courses should devote research on the post-harvest of cacao, because that was a very, very important knowledge that should be imparted on the technicians, on the industry, even the trade industry should know the importance of fermented, of making fine flavor cacao beans.
I'd say you're living proof of using Zoom, so you can take that back to your community council.
Yeah.
And Ariza, what about any tools that you've seen become of importance in Indonesia?
During COVID? Yeah, kindly we are already familiar with using Zoom or WebEx or Cisco or Google Meet. Now I have several different applications for online meeting in my tablet. So and we are kind of enjoying that online platform because it's easier for us to meet each other without having to take air trip, and we can have several different meetings at a time with several different people from different offices. And I had also been invited in Zoom meetings with farmers from Nusa Tenggara, somewhere else. If I had to take a trip there, it might spend maybe 2 days for a road trip. And then I was very happy that I could be in touch with the farmers. And then they also invited their other farmers from remote areas, and we enjoyed the meeting, and that was clear. And then they communicate freely in that online platform, because sometimes we felt that we are more heard in an online forum, and we couldn't see those influential people in a huge forum, so that we could speak freely. And I really appreciate and enjoyed the time with farmers and through the online platform.
Excellent. And I think, in this space, we just have about 20 minutes left. So I want to ensure that we're getting all the questions out. Liz or Carla, if anything comes to mind, please jump in. But otherwise, we can move on to discuss maybe intergenerational learning. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so June, you are your father's son, and you are still in the cacao business and agricultural business. It would be really interesting to hear what you think of the agriculture extension for the younger generation. And then following, I'd love to hear from Ariza what she's seen from her farmer collective in terms of that younger generation as well.
Okay, for the younger generation, not so much on the family, because I'm single, and my nephews and nieces on directly on my side, it's not really very interested in farming. But what I'm looking into is training the children of my workers, and I have already started on that, because the classes have been suspended and the children have nothing to do. So I encourage them to work in the farm, partially only during weekends, and only one day during weekends. And I teach them how to wrap, because our pest control method for pod borers is actually sleeving the pods with plastic bags, and it's a very easy work. And also, I also expose them into composting of using cacao pods and making compost out of the farm waste, and also methods of drying. And they wouldn't understand the fermentation yet, but how to dry, how to to prune the cacao, yeah, and sorting also, of course. sorting is a very easy job, and you can also teach them how to sort beans. And actually, we have just hired a newly graduate agriculturist, also a lady, and he's now in charge of monitoring the fermentation protocol. So maybe that's a very simple way on how to train the next generation. And actually, some of our farm workers have their own small farms, and we encourage them also to plant cacao in their small lots. And I also encourage them to plant the vegetables in their farm, because we also market spices. We have chili, we have black pepper also as our products being marketed in the supermarkets. Yeah.
Right. I was trying to interrupt by saying that I'm the shining example of his success of bringing in the next generation.
Yeah.
And
of course.
And I do think that what my Tito June is trying to say about the lack of explicit policy to bring in the next generation has a bigger context in terms of the socio-political landscape in the Philippines, in that we do have this backlog of the 21 years of the martial law regime that pulled us back for a very long time. And you can still feel the impact of that in a lot of policies, even in agriculture. And so, for example, within the coconut sector, we have the cocoa levy, which has not been settled. And that is holding back the coconut farmers. And so in terms of Davao and cacao, which is like this, the funding, of course, is, let's just say, focused in a region. And it's very hard to overcome that. So there are like other issues that we have to overcome in order to move forward to the next generation.
Ariza, do you have some thoughts or an outlook for where you see intergenerational cacao learning and training these days?
Yeah. So if you ask me if there are younger farmers in cacao sector, I would say that for my 11 years experience teaching farmers, I mostly see farmers in their 40s or 50s. So very rare a young farmer, particularly in cacao. I've seen in coffee. Last year I met a young farmer in cacao, but he was a congressman also. So cacao is only a side hustle. So they maintain cacao farm from their parents or grandparents, but they always have a settled job, like a civil servant, or maybe the easiest one is a taxi driver here. So young people, in general, they don't really like work in the agriculture. So there are always any other job that are more prestigious rather than doing farming.
You two have brought up some very key points here in terms of at the start of the conversation. I heard Ariza, Ernesto, and Estela all say the price of cacao is a fundamental challenge in both of your countries. Here now, I hear you both say the younger generation, it can be attracted to more interesting or exciting opportunities. And Estela, I pace with you completely. I am the granddaughter and daughter of rubber farmers from Papua New Guinea. So same thing in terms of, for us as a generation to be involved in our industry has also taken a very modern step that certainly when I think of my cousins on farms, don't necessarily get to have as such. And so I think if we bring these 2 points together, you both opened with the price of cacao as a fundamental barrier. And on the other side, it's not necessarily so attractive to the next generation. From other conversations we've been having here at FCCI Cacao, we have heard consistently that to bring a future or sustainability to our industry, it has directly to do with transparency and consistent value chain rising of conditions, and not just conditions around the price of cacao, but also the lifestyle of cacao. Ernesto, I have just loved and enjoyed visiting your farms on the times that I have done, and walking in there and suddenly feeling like you're in a multi-diverse paradise is a magical feeling. And you mentioned before that you are able to continue your business because you have plantings of other vegetables in the plantation, that you have developed in the value chain. I have seen your self-made machines where you have made your own winnower, you have made your own grinder, you have made your own value chain come to life. You're also lucky to have had education, lucky to have had a father to help you along, lucky to have family and friends like all of us to progress here. But for example, from your story, I hear it is price, it is availability, and then it is this diversification into either value chain or other crops, or another business models that you've also mentioned is selling the crops and also acquiring unfermented beans, fermenting them, and then selling them to local market. This is entrepreneurial at a whole other level than what classic cacao farming is typically marketed, certainly where we come from, and also I know where you three are also at. Could you imagine, if we just wrapped that together, could you imagine a world where where our industry, where we came together and we brought together resilience development in terms of skill sets for whole farming households, where everybody more or less was involved and contributing to a total big picture of this independent entrepreneurial approach in terms of there was skill set and understanding on profit and loss, market development. There was a skill set around the phytosanitation of the trees and things like this. And perhaps other skill sets are related to services that could occur on the farm when, for example, a crop doesn't necessarily come through. Ariza, you've been in this, as you mentioned, for 11 years, and you've trained thousands of farmers. Can you think of some examples where you have seen perhaps diversification or this larger perspective through household be successful in Indonesia?
Those that succeed in cacao farming are in Sulawesi. I can see they are living a wealthy life, but that is mostly because they have been doing cacao business for generations, and they have established farm and they have established buyers, and they are able to sell the beans with the recognized quality. You know, Sulawesi beans is not the best in the world. So they are just continuing their practice. So it's not something new that I can say. There's no such innovation in adding more income from their farms. I've seen, and we also introduced integrated farming system with cattle or with any other crops, and also horticulture. But I'm not confident to say that it will really bring more income to farmers. So those are good strategy, but I cannot show you the successful one from that integrative farming system. Yeah, but it is a very good strategy, a very promising, but you can see that the successful one are those in a cocoa region that already sell cacao in massive volume. Yeah, so challenging.
We are very close to our hour here, and it's been so interesting to listen to both of your perspectives from these very diverse situations in your two countries. Thank you again for taking the time. Any closing thoughts from Carla and Liz before we have our final two questions?
Thank you all so much for taking the time to teach us about what you know and to let us benefit from your expertise. We're grateful for that and look forward to continuing these conversations.
Okay, so we have been asking all of our guests what message they would like to have on a billboard. So this is your moment to shine to the world what your preferred sentence is. Estela, would you like to start?
This is addressed to the public. It's not actually a statement, I would say, but rather I would like to leave them with the question that they should ask themselves when they eat their chocolate bar. And that is, who planted and harvested the cocoa beans in your chocolate? I think that's something that everybody who's going to eat chocolate needs to ask.
Yeah,
June?
me too have.
Okay. You are? Okay.
No, please, June.
Because I have the same, almost the same tagline of my niece, Estela. Actually, it's about knowing the hands that feed you. Yeah, that's the tagline that I want to share, and also for the farmers. I would like also to say to them that quality is in your hands, in our hands. I mean, if we are the farmer, the quality is in our hands. And know the hands that feed you. Oh, that two messages.
Yeah, for me, it's similar to the spirit of June and Estela is to tell people that enjoy chocolate, love chocolate, grow cocoa. So if you love eating chocolate, you have to motivate people here that are growing cocoa for you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Very well said. And please let us and the audience know, those who are going to see this video later on the YouTube channel, what we can do to help you do your work, where we can support you.
Well, as you very well know, Carla and you, Lauren, have and of course Liz, have the technology. And that's what we really need. The new developments and more knowledge on how really to improve our cacao beans.
So for me, the most important public can help me is to provide feedback from the consumer end so that I can improve the quality of our cacao to match the demand of the consumer. And it will also shape our research and development activity.
Okay, well, Estela, if you don't have any comments, we will close for today. And thank you again. And Liz and Carla will be taking these thoughts into their development of the FCCI Cacao Academy. And we will be back next week for our 12th episode. Thank you again for being a part, and we will see you soon.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Terima kasih. Selamat malam.
Thank you very much.
Selamat malam.